Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. My name is Daniel Ross, 39, electrical engineer and co-owner of a mid-sized consulting firm in Montana. Friday night, early fall, the kind of evening when the air smells like cut straw and diesel from the two-lane. I let myself into the farmhouse kitchen expecting the usual small talk and a plan for dinner. She was at the counter in a sweatshirt and leggings, chin tilted down to her phone. No smile, no hey, just thumbs moving. I set a sack of takeout on the table. Figured we could eat on the porch. It's nice out. She didn't look up. I already ate. When? On the way back from town. With who? Just the girls. I stood there for a beat, listening to the compressor cycle on the old fridge. You didn't text. I didn't think it mattered, she said, still scrolling. It matters if I'm driving an hour out here with dinner. She exhaled like I'd asked her to solve a math problem. You're always so dramatic, Daniel. Not everything has to be about you. That's kind of the point, I said calm. Nothing's been about us for a while. Separate meals, separate weekends, separate everything. She finally lifted her eyes. We're busy. It's harvest. I know what harvest is. I glanced toward the window where the yard light cut a pale circle over the gravel. I've been here most weekends for 9 years, if I'm counting. You chose that, she said, turning her body halfway, as if the conversation were a show she might change channels on. I didn't ask you to play hero. You didn't have to ask. I pointed at the table. You liked it when I showed up and fixed what needed fixing. You liked it when the place ran smoother. She smirked. And you liked feeling indispensable. It works both ways. It used to, I said. Lately it's felt one way. She dropped the phone face down. You're being clingy. Honestly, it's boring. I nodded once. Okay, then let's be boring for 10 minutes and talk like adults. I pulled out a chair, but didn't sit. Do you actually want to be in this marriage? Silence. A tractor idled somewhere far off. The sound came in waves. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, expression flat. I'm serious, I said, because I'm not interested in roommates. I'm not interested in performing stability for your friends while we barely look at each other at home. I'm meeting them at the winery in half an hour, she said, as if I hadn't spoken. So if you're going to lecture me, make it quick. I stared at the laminate edge of the counter to steady myself. No anger, just a tired kind of clarity. I don't need a lecture either. I need an answer. She shrugged, a small, sharp motion. If you're not happy, then leave. That what you want? She tilted her head, smile without warmth. Leave. See if I care. The line hung there between us like the fly strip over the sink. I didn't repeat it back. I set my keys on the counter. The clink startled her more than anything I'd said. Where are you going? She asked, a half laugh writing the words, like it was a bluff she expected me to fold. I've got clothes in the truck. I'd kept a go bag there for months, a habit that started when my workdays stretched late and I crashed at the office. Funny how preparation looks like paranoia until it looks like foresight. You're overreacting, she said. I'm reacting, I said. There's a difference. I carried the takeout back to the door, set it beside my boots, and stepped onto the porch. The sky was a thin blue going gray. I could hear the grain fans from the bins, that low metallic whine that becomes a backdrop to your thinking if you let it. People expect fireworks at endings. We had none. Just a parting so clean it felt surgical. I climbed into the truck and drove the county road until the farmhouse disappeared in the rear view and the fields opened up on both sides. Neat rows and big machinery, working lights on in the distance. I turned the radio off and let the road noise fill the cab. I'd been splitting time between the city and the farm so long that my apartment looked like a hotel room and the farmhouse felt like a workshop. I checked into a small place near my office, the kind with a coffee maker that never quite gets the water hot enough. I sent 2 texts, both short. One to my project lead about a Monday site walk, one to an old friend about moving a few boxes. No announcement, just quiet logistics. The weekend stretched. She didn't call, didn't ask where I'd gone. I walked the river path downtown, bought a heavier jacket, changed the emergency contact on my insurance. Little edits. You'd be surprised how much of a life is fields in a form you forgot you filled out. Saturday evening, I made a list, not of grievances, but of facts. We had grown farther apart with each season. Conversations were mostly scheduling. Touch had become currency. Her friends rolled their eyes at my work like power systems were a hobby, not the reason the lights came on. When she was home, her phone was alive. When I spoke, it went dark. The last time we'd laughed hard was over a broken ladder and a raccoon in the barn 2 summers ago. That memory felt borrowed. People who don't work with infrastructure think in events. People who do think in dependencies. What fails when this fails? Where the load goes. How long a system can run on wishful thinking before it doesn't. Sitting on that motel bed with a legal pad, I realized our marriage had been running on assumptions and my over-engineering for years. If a bearing squealed, I greased it. If a panel flickered, I traced the short. If her father needed a fix by morning, I drove out with a thermos and a headlamp. We never asked why everything needed me to keep humming. We just liked that it did. More than 7 years earlier, when the place was struggling to keep up, I'd fronted a project most families around here only daydream about. It was an investment in something I believed we both wanted to last. I never talked about it like a lever because I never planned to pull it. You do things for the people you love and you don't send them an invoice. But there's a difference between loving someone and underwriting their indifference. That was the sentence I wrote and underlined twice. I stared at it until the words blurred. On Sunday morning, I drove back out, not to the farmhouse, but to the diner off the highway where the harvest crews eat pancakes the size of steering wheels. I drank 2 cups of coffee and watched men in ball caps compare weather apps and grain moisture like surgeons discussing vitals. I felt more at ease among strangers discussing real thresholds than in a kitchen where my wife called me boring. When I finally turned the truck toward town again, the decision felt done, not dramatic. I wasn't going to beg for a part in a play that had already recast me as background. If you tell a man who builds systems to leave, you should assume he knows which valves are his to close and which lines he'll never touch again. By Monday, my desk was clean, my calendar tightened, my name off a few things I shouldn't have been carrying alone. I moved cash where it needed to be, signed a short lease, bought a set of plates and a decent knife. No grand speeches. Just the quiet relief of living in a place where every switch you flip belongs to you. She still hadn't called by midweek. That told me more than any argument could. When people show you precisely how replaceable you are in their plans, believe them. I did. And for the first time in months, maybe years, the noise in my head went still. Her father called the following Friday, right when I was tightening a project schedule. His number popped up with that old photo of him grinning beside a grain cart, sunburned and proud. I let it ring twice, answered on the third. Busy week? He asked, like we were neighbors discussing fence posts. Always, I said. Harvest's rolling. Moisture's good. Thank God the dryers are humming, or we'd be underwater. He paused for effect. You know how it is. I do. What I don't know, he went on, is what you and my daughter think you're doing. You staying in the city now, or what? I'm giving space, I said. He cleared his throat. Huh. Well, don't make it dramatic. We've got real things going on out here. Another pause, then the tone I knew too well, a soft shove wrapped as a favor. If you can swing by this weekend, I got a panel that's acting fussy. Might be nothing. A wiggle and a reset. A wiggle and a reset. 9 years of weekends and midnight calls reduced to a jiggle of wires in his mind. The same detachment she'd used in the kitchen traveled straight through his voice. Not how are you? Not what happened. Just the assumption that the hand he'd relied on would still appear when summoned. I won't be out this weekend, I said. You mad at us? He asked, like the farm and the marriage were one account with a single balance. I'm focused on work, I said. And I'm not your electrician. A long silence. The dryer droned in the background on his end. On mine, the office HVAC kicked on and evened out to a low hiss. Suit yourself, he said finally. We'll figure it out. I know you will. We hung up. I stared at the project Gantt chart on my screen until the colored bars meant nothing, then minimized everything and opened a folder I hadn't touched in a while. Contracts. Easements. A scan map with my handwriting in the margins. More than 7 years earlier, when their service kept tripping under harvest load and the nearest utility crew treated them like a rural afterthought, I'd pulled together a solution that made sense. We modernized the transformer substation and the distribution to the bins and pumps, replaced the tired breakers, added protection relays, cleaned up the grounding, and pulled new aluminum to the far pivots. They couldn't finance it then. I did. Not as charity. We wrote it down like adults. a long-term service and operations agreement with full transfer rights if I ever needed to step away. The asset lived on their land. The responsibility lived with me until I said otherwise. Everybody signed. I found the clause I remembered by feel. Transfer of operations to a qualified third party at holder's discretion. Notice to be filed with the county and incumbent provider. No interruption in service anticipated under standard conditions. Receiving party assumes billing and tariff classification consistent with commercial operations. My initials in the margin like a small nod to a past self who did not make decisions with his feelings. I pulled the maintenance logs for the last 2 seasons. The work was good. The loads were predictable. The equipment was sound. None of what came next would be about sparks and smoke. It would be about paperwork and categories, about who owns what problem when the bill arrives. I called a number I'd saved for years under a first name and a company acronym. He picked up on the second ring. We'd worked together on an industrial park where the local co-op couldn't keep up with growth, and the commercial provider had stepped in with a turnkey package. He remembered my voice before I said my last name. We talked about meters, service classes, demarcation points, and transfer packets. We talked about account holders and contact lists and how quickly their team could swap the operator of record if the documents were clean. He asked for the meter numbers, the transformer plate data, the GPS pin for the substation gate. I read them straight off my screen. Tariff, he asked. Standard commercial for seasonal operations, I said. Whatever your default is for peak load facilities with variable demand. No agricultural exemptions on file. None requested, I said. He let that hang for a second. Understood. We went through onboarding like it was any other facility. Fine, billing address, service history. He sent over the transfer packet with a digital signature slot for me and a recorded notice template for the county. I filled them in carefully, triple-checked the legal descriptions against the plat, and attached the original agreement and the easement map, all tidy and legible. On the contact page, where it asked for primary and secondary emails for service notices, I typed mine in the first line and hers in the second because I planned to be precise. We talked implementation dates. He offered end of month. I asked if sooner was possible without a field visit. He confirmed the meters were on their system already. Only the operator of record and tariff class would change. Standard service update, in their language. No trucks. A flip on the back end and a letter in the mail. How fast do you want it, he asked. As soon as your compliance team is happy, I said. I'm not in a hurry. I'm just done. It came out flatter than I expected. I'll push it through this afternoon, he said. You'll get confirmations at both emails. Welcome aboard. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the edge of my desk until the wood grain stopped moving. Then I stood, walked down the hall, and poured coffee I didn't want just to feel the weight of the mug in my hand. Back in my office, I opened the county recorder's site and filed the notice so it wouldn't sit on someone else's to-do list. I scanned the stamped PDF and saved it to the same folder as the original agreement. I printed a hard copy for a fireproof box I kept behind my desk for exactly this kind of thing. My phone buzzed with a calendar alert for a team check-in, and I joined the call like nothing had moved under my feet. We discussed trench depths and delivery dates and a subcontractor who'd misread a spec. I listened, answered, reassigned, and logged off. Afterward, I dialed the number for the farmhouse out of habit, then put the phone back down without hitting call. There was nothing to say. He had wanted a wiggle and a reset. For years, I had been the wiggle, the reset. The midnight ladder on dewy grass, the headlamp slicing barn dust, the little fixes that are only little if you count them one by one. This was the end of a service I'd been providing for free, stability without respect. I stepped out of a role they'd grown so used to they mistook it for gravity. Late afternoon, the confirmations arrived, one after another, crisp and impersonal. Transfer accepted. Operator of record updated. Tariff class set per service type. Contact list verified. I read each line once, then moved the messages to a folder with a name that would make sense to me 6 months from now. That evening, I left the office before dark for the first time in weeks and drove across town to a hardware store for a set of wrenches I didn't strictly need. The aisles felt clean in a way my life hadn't for a while. Everything in bins with part numbers and torque specs. Outside, the sky went pink over the rail yard, and somewhere to the west, dryers thrummed and augers purred, and a family assumed tomorrow would be like today. 2 Mondays after the transfer, The first email landed at 8:12 a.m. Subject line plain as a utility pole, service activation and initial billing terms. The company copywriters weren't poets. I opened the PDF, skimmed the header, and let my eyes settle on the parts that matter to anyone who's ever kept motors alive during harvest. Tariff, demand, peak windows, penalties. Commercial rate plan, seasonal peak pricing. A prepaid account wallet required to remain positive at all times. Automatic remote disconnection when the balance crossed zero. Reconnection subject to deposit and queue availability. Standard conditions, nothing personal. At 8:13 a.m., the same message arrived in the second inbox I'd listed on the contact sheet, hers. 2 addresses were on file by design. They wanted the system to run without me. The system would now tell them what it costs. The invoice itself was clean. Line items that never bothered with sentiment. Base service charge, energy, kilowatt hour, by time of use buckets, demand, kW, by monthly peak, delivery, riders for transmission and conservation, tax. A small paragraph in bold announced the part most people skip until it hurts. Your facility has been reclassified under seasonal commercial with demand. Under current conditions and usage profile, your effective rate is estimated to be approximately 30% higher than prior service. 5 days to fund the wallet to the minimum threshold. Failure to fund would begin a countdown to discontinuance. Another paragraph about late penalties that compound like any other form of indifference. I could picture the dinner table when that landed in their world. Calculator out. Pencil tapping the margin of an old seed invoice because the good stationery is long gone by harvest. Someone asking what demand is and why they're paying for the highest 30-minute slice of a busy month instead of the average. Someone else saying it can't be right. They've always paid after the crops were sold. That's how the co-op did it. A phone call put on hold. A polite voice reading terms that don't bend just because a mortgage is involved. The thing about infrastructure is that it isn't a weapon. It's a mirror. For years, the farm's mirrors said, Daniel absorbs the surge. Daniel smooths the curve. Daniel pays when timing doesn't. They told me to leave. I left. The mirror changed. Now it reflected only what the load actually costs without a man softening the edges. By mid-morning, the portal showed the wallet unfunded, a red bar near zero, a gray banner advising pre-authorization options, and autopay. The rules were clear, no positive balance. The timers on their grain dryers don't care about family politics. The soft starters on their pumps don't know who used to wipe the dust off their cabinets with a shop towel folded just so. They take what they're given, and if they aren't given, they wait in a silence that grows teeth. Around noon, another email rolled in, notice of seasonal peak adjustment. The heat had pushed yesterday's afternoon window into a higher bracket. On peak from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m., off peak around the edges. The math gets ugly when you need to move air at the same hours the grid wants you quiet. You can stage fans and run nights, but grain doesn't dry on good intentions, and compressors don't like being your scapegoat. People who think this is revenge don't understand the slope of a ledger. Revenge aims at feelings. This is the opposite. It removes feelings, removes the soft middle where favors act like low-interest loans. This is what it costs when a place finally has to wear its own weight. I had given them a modern, efficient, privately managed lifeline because I believed in the work and the family that lived around it. They preferred a version of me that existed on demand without the dignity of being asked. Now they had a provider that will never take Sunday supper at their table, never trade elk sausage for an emergency call, never pretend a due date is negotiable because a storm flattened the West Field. Corporations have no memory. They have clocks. Late afternoon, a second document appeared, formal funding request and disconnection timeline. The language tightened. Your account requires an immediate preload equal to projected 5-day peak usage plus deposit. If not received by 5 p.m. on day 5, remote interruption will occur. It listed reconnection fees in a neat column. Then the part that trips people. Restoration may take up to 48 hours after deposit clearance. Availability not guaranteed during system events. In other words, we can turn you off with a keystroke. Turning you back on depends on whether we feel like a storm is brewing. I closed the laptop and stared at nothing for a minute. My hands were steady. I poured coffee, tasted metal, threw it out. There's a reason I don't chase arguments anymore. Arguments promise relief if you pick the right words. Systems deliver outcomes if you pick the right levers. I'd picked mine months ago when I started sleeping with a bag in the truck, and years ago when I wrote transfer rights into a document nobody at a family dinner ever asked to read. Night fell. I walked the river path and counted lighted windows in the office buildings across the water. You can tell who's new to pressure by how long they leave lights on after everyone's gone. Old hands shut switches fast. They know the meter's always running, whether you look at it or not. On the third day, a reminder pinged both inboxes at 7:02 a.m. The portal's red bar had shortened. Either someone had tested the payment page and backed out, or the system had posted a fee that ate what little remained. Another banner offered a grace extension if the wallet hit minimum within 24 hours. The fine print was surgical. Extension void if usage spiked beyond modeled load. Harvest laughs at models. It always has. I kept my side of the street clean. When my project manager asked if I could fly east for a pre-bid, I said yes. I prefer airports when something large is about to shift. The people there are all leaving or arriving. It balances the mind. At the gate, I wrote a sentence in a notebook because sometimes ink makes a boundary real. I don't finance contempt. It was a perimeter line around a life that had started to look like someone else's open account. When the plane landed that night, my phone woke up with a handful of automated notices stacked like railcars. Payment still pending. Disconnection window confirmed. Demand peak recalculated due to yesterday's fans. I swiped them away and ordered dinner at the hotel bar. Small steak, potatoes, water. A game I didn't care about played without sound. Two sales guys next to me argued over a discount code like it was a matter of state. Everyone has their own crisis, and most of them are just math dressed as fate. The fifth morning arrived the way deadlines do, without ceremony. At 8 a.m., the company sent its final curt paragraph. Funding not received. Service interruption scheduled. The note ended with the kind of cheer that only exists in customer service templates. We value your business. Sure, in the way a scale values whatever you set on it. I closed the message and looked out at a sky the color of galvanized steel. I didn't like what was coming for them. But liking has nothing to do with the truth. The truth is that they asked me to be gone, and imagined gone meant quiet generosity humming in the walls like a secret furnace. They pictured absence as a shadow that still lights the room. I don't work that way. When I stop carrying, the thing weighs what it weighs. When I step out, the floor must hold without my hands underneath. 2 weeks earlier, in a kitchen where my name had become a nuisance, I'd been told to leave and see if anyone cared. Now the only caring that mattered wore a logo and a billing department and a timer measured in hours, not hearts. They wanted me out of the frame. I kept my promise. The first slip was a subject line. Tariff revision, seasonal peak pricing. It hit my inbox at 6:12 a.m. I knew because I'd set both addresses on the account the day I signed the transfer. Mine first, hers as the secondary contact. I watched the paired notifications arrive like twin buoys lighting a channel I'd already charted. Nothing to say, nothing to fix, just policy timestamped. By noon, a second email landed. Prepay threshold triggered. Action required to avoid service interruption. Same twin ping. I opened mine, scrolled through the boilerplate. Demand charge, seasonal peak multipliers, grace window measured in hours, not days. It was the kind of language people ignore until it unplugs their life. It cared about kilowatts and due dates. My phone started vibrating at 12:21 p.m. Her name. Then the second call came from a farmhand I knew by voice more than name. Dryers won't start. I let it roll to voicemail. At 12:36, her father's number flashed. He didn't leave a message. After a text from her, "What did you do?" Then, "We need to talk. Please." Then, fast after, the tone I knew too well. Accusation in address that thinks it's concern. "This is childish. You're hurting my family." I put the phone face down and ate my sandwich. The disconnect notice sent itself at 1400 hours. Auto disconnect scheduled, 1700 hours absent prepayment. I saw it the second it released because both addresses got it, exactly as designed. There's no drama in a countdown clock until you've got bins full of damp grain and a line of trucks waiting to unload. On the farm camera they'd never turned off my access to. I could see the yard fill with idle metal. Drivers leaning on hoods. Someone kicking a tire. Humor at first, then those slow head shakes that mean I've got other places to be. Later she switched tactics. I'll come by. Let's clear this up face to face. I typed one line back, my first in 3 days. Please contact your service provider. She called me cold. That's you. She snapped, forgetting for a beat what she'd said in our kitchen when she told me to leave and see if I care. I let the silence swallow her. She filled it with noise. Why? How? You can't. You wouldn't. Until her own breath told her the answer. The click wasn't loud. It just meant the line was clean again. Power dropped at 17:01. The camera view went black and rebooted into gray. Elsewhere, you could measure it in numbers. Amps to 0, pressure at the well dying, compressor faults stacking in a log. On the ground, you measured it by sound. Fans went quiet. The grain dryers coughed, then gave up. The refrigeration units stopped their low animal hum. Silence will tell you more about a place than any tour guide. This silence said, your margin just left. Options. There are always options, just not inside a harvest week. A rental genset big enough to run the dryers had a wait list and a daily rate that would make a banker wince. Fuel on top. The co-op couldn't get a new service drop for 2, maybe 3 weeks, even with a rush. A contractor could fabricate a workaround, sure, if you had spare parts, spare hands, and spare time. They had none of those. They had sunlight, and not enough of it. Her father called again, this time a voicemail. His voice had that paper-thin shake old men get when they finally realize the weather won't bend to their schedule. Call me back. Then, softer, not for me, but for whatever God gives attention to voicemail, he did what? The rules weren't personal. They were printed on the notice both of them had ignored at noon. By 1920, the crew started to peel away. Day laborers don't work in the dark without machines to make the dark irrelevant. They pocketed gloves, slapped tailgates, and drove off in 2s and 3s, not angry, just pragmatic. One of the steadier guys texted me that he was sorry I got dragged into their mess. I told him to take care of himself and left it at that. He sent back a thumbs up and a prayer hands emoji like a kid who doesn't know which religion covers electricity. I took a drive after sundown because I wanted to see the edges of it, not the spectacle. The road past the farm was already lined with trucks that had turned around. The house itself glowed in patches from battery lanterns and old flashlights, the kind you forget in drawers. The outbuildings were dark hulks against the sky. The air had that wrong sweetness, the first hint of moisture turning grain into a science project you can't scrap fast enough. At 21:03, another email. Penalty assessment, late payment fee applied. Both inboxes. She screenshotted hers and sent it to me like I hadn't seen mine. You're enjoying this. No. Enjoyment is a luxury you get when you confuse consequence with revenge. I poured myself water, reviewed my checklist, keys returned, lease signed, accounts separated, forwarders set, and slept 8 hours. Morning brought the kind of bargaining men make at auto shops. We'll pay today, just turn it on, please. The rep on the line had a script, and she followed it. Prepay posts, flags clear, meters re-energize. No supervisor override for harvest. No, we know your family discount. Commercial service is a machine. You don't plead with it, you feed it. She texted me that someone at the company told her it seemed unusual that the account had migrated so quickly. I didn't respond. There's nothing unusual about paperwork filed on time. By noon, they'd triaged the perishables with ice and prayer. Buyers pulled their offers. Contracts went from confirmed to reviewing to regret to inform. Suppliers who had winked at late checks last spring suddenly rediscovered policy. I watched it all from the same distance you keep from a live wire. Not out of cruelty, out of respect, for power, for contract, for the truth that kept getting talked over when I was still living in that house. The truth was simple. If you treat a man like he's replaceable long enough, you eventually find out what he used to hold up for you. Around 1500 hours, she tried soft. A voice memo. The first in this entire mess without an edge. You were good for us. I know that now. Can we just reset the account for a week? I'll make it right after. It would have worked on another version of me. The one who swallowed disrespect because the harvest couldn't wait. The one who believed good intent beats terms. I listened once because I owed that version of me something. Then I archived it. Late afternoon, the company sent a formal rate bulletin outlining the next month's peak windows and an updated schedule of penalties. 2 lines mattered. Seasonal increase, 30%. Auto disconnect on arrears. The message went to both addresses, just as I'd arranged. She forwarded it to me with no caption, as if copying the law might shame the law into changing. I sat on the porch, the sun low and mean, and thought about the night she'd squared her shoulders and told me to leave, told me to go see if she cared. She did care, I could hear it now. Not about me. About the one thing you can't charm or scold into obedience: infrastructure. Word got around, like it always does in a town that runs on borrowed tools, and the weather report. A neighbor who'd heard her say I was holding her back stopped by my place just to nod. Not to gossip, just to nod. I'd set one boundary, and the world had done the rest. That night, I checked the camera feed one more time. Gray again, then black, then nothing. Somewhere in that dark, a pump clicked futilely against a dry line, the last little muscle twitch of a body that doesn't know it's already gone still. I closed the app. Boundaries held. The machine was teaching the lesson I never could, and it spoke a language everyone eventually understands. Pay first, or go dark. The morning after the cutoff, I woke up before my alarm and sat on the edge of the bed in a room that smelled like new paint and cardboard. Just clean air and a calendar that finally belonged to me. I made coffee, answered a vendor's question about conduit lead times, and filed the last envelope from the transfer packet into a fireproof box labeled with a single word: closed. By midweek, the story was doing what stories do in small places, trading hands faster than receipts. When people asked what happened, I gave the same sentence every time. I'm no longer responsible for that facility. If they pushed, I repeated it. Facts have a way of sounding rude to people who are used to favors. She tried a different approach that afternoon. A text with a photo of the bins, gray sky pressing down, a caption that said, "This is bad. I know you're angry, but can we fix it together?" I looked at the picture, at the metal I'd kept breathing for years, and recognized what she still didn't. Not everything broken needs my hands. I typed 6 words that weren't unkind, just accurate. There's nothing for me to fix. On Thursday, a buyer I liked called me directly. Not to pry, just to confirm what he'd already decided. He was pulling his contract. "Can't roll trucks on wishful thinking," he said, grim but fair. I told him I understood and thanked him for being straight with me. He said he hoped I was doing okay. I told him I was. Both of us meant it. Her father left one more message that night. He sounded tired in a way that doesn't ask for sympathy. "I was wrong," he said. "We treated you like a socket on the wall." He let the silence sit, then added, almost to himself, "Power's easy to ignore until it isn't." I listened twice because the man deserved that much. Then I erased it. Forgiveness and restoration are different trades. I could offer the first without confusing it for the second. The farm lost its harvest and income for the entire season. That sentence looks simple on a page. Out where the wind lives, it means trucks don't roll, checks don't land, repairs get postponed, and plans shrink. Insurance will cover what insurance covers and leave the rest where it fell. A season is a story told in weather, sweat, and timing. You don't get to edit the ending after the last page goes dark. She knocked on my apartment door on a Sunday, early, wearing a sweatshirt I'd bought on a trip we took back when trips still felt like team projects. I opened the door, stepped aside, and let her speak first. She started with the word people choose when they need the past to carry new weight. We could talk. We could reset. We could make it right. I let her finish, then told her the truth. There is no we. That includes you deciding when my labor shows up and how invisible I have to be to make you comfortable. I said the line I'd been living. Respect is the only price of admission here. It's not negotiable, and it's past due. She blinked like I'd turned a light on. She tried a softer angle, the one that once worked because I believed all pain meant progress. "I miss how safe I felt when you handled things." I nodded. Safe isn't a feeling I create so you can ignore me. It's what we build by handling things together. She stared at the floor, then at the hall behind me, as if the version of us she preferred might still be standing there, just late to the scene. When she realized he wasn't coming, she straightened, thanked me for opening the door, and walked away without theatrics. That, finally, felt respectful. The paperwork of separation is unglamorous, which makes it perfect for endings. I updated beneficiaries, closed joint autopays, forwarded mail I'd missed, signed a notice removing myself from the co-op membership he'd added my name to one Christmas after too much bourbon and a good harvest. I changed the emergency contact on my license. I deleted the farm camera app, not in anger, just because it was noise. Dignity is quiet housekeeping. A week later, the county clerk's office called to confirm the recorded transfer notice and ask if I wanted a certified copy mailed or held. I told them to hold. I like picking up certain documents in person. Paperweight in the hand grounds a life in ways email never will. The clerk slid the envelope across the counter and said, "We don't see many of these." I said, "You will." It wasn't a threat or prophecy, just an observation about a world that keeps outsourcing gratitude to the nearest reliable person until he stops being nearest, stops being reliable for them. I walked the river path at dawn and watched the city switch on in measured squares. I bought a real pantry for a kitchen that had been a hallway. I returned a borrowed ladder that had lived in my truck long enough to think it was mine. When a neighbor's breaker tripped, he asked if I'd take a look. I said yes, fixed it in 5 minutes, and refused the beer he kept lifting toward me like a tip jar. We chatted about fishing. I went upstairs. Saying yes felt better when it didn't cost a piece of me I could never invoice. People kept wanting a moral, which is how you know they're scared it might be their turn next. The closest I'll offer is this. Dependency and disrespect can share a room for years if the lights never flicker. The first night they go out, you learn who knows where the matches are and who never planned to pay for candles. I used to be the matches, the candles, and the hand shielding the flame. I'm not that anymore. I'm the man who keeps his side of the meter and expects adults to do the same. She texted once more, weeks after the last of the spoilage had been hauled, after the crew had scattered to other jobs, after the house had grown so quiet you could hear the refrigerator step down at night. "I hope you're well." I typed back, "I am. Not a door, not a bridge, just a completed circuit." She didn't reply. I won't pretend I felt nothing. That's performative and false. I felt relief, mostly. A clean border where there used to be a smear. Some sadness for a version of us that might have survived if respect had shown up on time and kept paying. And a steady pride that I left when I was asked to, without breaking anything that wasn't already broken. A friend asked if I'd ever drive back down that road during harvest again, park by the shoulder, and listen to the fans run like they used to when we were right with each other. I told him I wouldn't. That music belongs to people who meet their obligations as readily as they make their demands. It's not my song anymore. She told me, "Leave. See if I care." I left. She cared when the bills came due. I cared when the respect didn't. We both got clarity. That's the quiet bargain the world keeps, even when people don't. Pay what you owe, or go without.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.